Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Creepy and Paranormal podcast. Today is episode 30, and boy, oh boy, have we got a tough one for you today. It's really a difficult one to talk about. It's something that I've been following now, the story on Facebook with regards to what's happening, and it's called the Justice for Josh case. It's based here in South Africa, and it's really, it feels close to home in the sense that this could happen to absolutely anyone. It's really sad and disastrous what has happened. When I saw this, I reached out to the family and asked for their permission to release an episode on what actually happened with what happened to Josh, I should say. And yeah, they were generous enough to share their story with me. Unfortunately, they will not be recording the episode with me, and rightfully so, as you can imagine how difficult it must be for them to talk about over and over again. So I'm very grateful that they've given me this opportunity to read out the story on behalf of the mother. But yeah, guys, so please just be kind and generous and courteous in your comments. Listen to it with an open mind. Understand the hurts that this family has gone through. And yeah, just hope that somehow this episode brings the story more to light and more public pressure could be added to the case in a positive way so that justice for Josh will be served. I think we're going to just jump straight into the intro and then we're going to dive into the story. Right, like I mentioned earlier, I will be reading the story on behalf of Josh's mom, Julie. So here we go. I want to tell my story. My story is devastating, a life-shattering trauma and tragedy that should have not have happened. Something that shouldn't happen to anyone. But it happened. It happened to my son. It happened to me and to my family and to a community. It changed everything, for everyone, forever. 18 months later, as I look back at what has been the most terrible time anyone could endure, there have been these beacons of light that have carried us thus far. Even during the darkest hours of despair, there have been these lights of hope. On the 5th of January 2021, I spent a normal morning with my then 10-year-old daughter, buying all the back-to-school necessities for my 3 children. Just after lunchtime, I returned home and took my 16-year-old son to visit a new school friend. The friend had lots of pets, some exotic, and Josh loved animals. So much so, he had been a vegetarian from the age of 12. I dropped him off at a property not far from where we live. I met the friend and another boy, chatted to the friend's mom before leaving the property to go about my day and with the intention of fetching Josh before dinner. But dinner didn't happen. As I took the ingredients out of the fridge that afternoon, I received a call that changed everything, a call that nobody should receive, a call that froze time, shattered our lives, and changed the world we once knew. Less than 3 hours after dropping Josh off for an innocent playdate, Josh was dead. Moments after putting one of the pets back in its cage, Josh was shot with a shotgun at close range by his friend. The hours, days, and weeks that followed were chaos. SAPS did everything we should have expected from Becky Clayle's team. They arrived 4 hours later. The investigating officer opened a murder docket, established that the guns had not been in a safe for months, if not years, spoke to the shooter who told him he had shot Josh, and that was pretty much that. Surely he needed statements. Surely he needed to investigate something. Surely the shooter and his father should be arrested. But no. The investigating officer reluctantly came to see us 3 weeks later. Witnesses had since come forward, minors, teenage kids that had been friends with the accused number 1 and with Josh, kids who had spoken to their parents and felt they needed to give statements. Josh had been killed and they wanted to speak up. They wanted the police to know about the atrocity waiting to happen on that property for years. It could have been any of them. It could have been anyone. And it had to end. The investigating officer entered our house, rolled his eyes, and while constantly checking the time, reluctantly took statements from the teenagers accompanied by a parent, and eventually from myself. Tim and the other adults that had been to the property that day. Following on from Josh's death, my daughter was sent a photo of the accused, holding a shotgun to his chin and a pistol to his head. The photo had a timestamp of March 2020. We gave this to the officer, but he didn't feel it was important. There had been another boy when I dropped Josh off. We had given him the boy's details, parents' details, phone numbers, and address. Maybe this boy knew something. Maybe the police officer should have phoned him or his parents and asked some questions. They didn't live far. Maybe the police could go and speak to them. But again, no. He checked the time, rolled his eyes, and left, leaving the picture on our dining room table and muttering something about COVID and this case going no further. We were defeated. We couldn't believe what had just happened. Our precious child was dead. A murder docket had been opened. Teenage children had come forward to state that they had loaded the guns handed to them and pointed at them by the shooter since grade 8. The shooter and his parents had guns lying around the property for years. The shooter's parents hosted other people's children and even a birthday party for years and had never bothered to lock the guns in a safe, ever. Our son was dead, but this was not worth Warrant Officer Ferreira's time. It was after all 4 p.m. and time for him to go home. Tim and I sat on the couch the next morning, tears pouring from our eyes, looked at each other and made a decision. The story wasn't over. It couldn't end here. The people responsible for ripping the pages from Josh's book were not getting away with this and certainly weren't going to have the opportunity to do this again. I looked at Tim and asked him, how many other families does this happen to? How many children are killed in South Africa? How many moms and dads are out there wondering what happened and left feeling like their child didn't matter enough for the police to act? An innocent child, a son, twin, big brother, cousin, grandson, nephew, and friend had been taken. This story wasn't ending here. Not like this. It couldn't. If Becky Cele's lazy team with badges weren't going to do what they are paid to do, we'd do it ourselves. But here's the thing. South Africa is a country run by corrupt criminals with badges in high-profile positions. The crime statistics speak for themselves. Hijackings are up by 19.7%. We have 67 murders and 33 kidnappings every single day. Some of the very people that are supposed to protect us are criminals themselves and have absolutely no concern for the welfare of the citizens of this country. They sit around doing little to nothing other than wait for payday so they can spend the taxpayers' money. They don't care how much money you spend on arguably the country's best private forensic investigator to do their job for them and solve the case in 48 hours. Paul O'Sullivan interviewed the third boy and his father, who were present when Josh was killed. The contents of their statements were explosive, to say the least, but Paul's work was disregarded by the investigating officer as well as his captain. They must have tossed it in the bin after Paul handed them everything they needed because they were not added to the docket. They also disregarded the fact that the owner of the firearm had multiple criminal records dating back to 1979, including reckless driving, theft, and common assault, and should have not been allowed to obtain a firearm license in 2011. Surely such a person is a danger to society. Standing up to this travesty of justice is close to impossible. especially when you have just lost your precious son, trying to hold yourself together, trying to parent your devastated daughters, trying to simply survive, one moment at a time. So, how do you get up and do anything other than breathe? How do you take your daughters back to school without their brother? Walk his twin into school without him? How do you refuse to accept that he died in vain and demand a change? You can't. Not alone. You need an army. Josh was 16 years old and had his whole life ahead of him. He was looking forward to grade 11 and matric, learning to drive and get in a car. He was the boy with the big heart. He was the kind of son any parent would wish for. He loved his sisters and was protective and kind. He always had time for everyone, young and old, and loved animals. He was the boy that would play with the little kids and take them for a ride on his golf cart. If he saw other kids walking home from school, he'd give them a lift, especially if it was raining. If he saw people walking home from work within the estate, he didn't hesitate to stop and give them a lift to the gate. Josh played ice hockey and would practice for hours, sometimes the only person on the ice rink. If he saw someone struggling to skate, Josh would help them. His dream was to one day play for South Africa. Kindness and love came naturally to Josh, who touched lives and made the world a better place. Josh was hardworking and always the first one to help. If he heard a car pull up on the driveway, he'd rush outside. He'd carry the groceries in or help with the visitors' bags. He'd always help get the little ones out of their car seats and hold their hand as they walked into the house. And he did it in a willingly and with a big smile. Josh was friends with everyone and always put others first. He was loved beyond measure, and he projected light, love, and joy wherever he went. Losing Josh was and is inexplainable, and we will never get over this, nor understand why this happened to Josh. Josh didn't deserve this. Nobody deserves this. But Josh's story didn't end here, and our story won't end here. Despite the darkness and the sorrow, there was somehow always a light we couldn't deny nor escape. There was an army. There was an army that fulfilled so many roles, right from that moment when our world turned black. As we lay in the deepest ditches of despair, they were there, right from the beginning. There was this endless army of real-life angels. Within the first few hours, days, weeks, and months, they were on my doorstep every single day. My fridge, freezer, and table were full for months. When we collapsed, they lay and cried with us, and when we were ready, they helped us to our feet. We were offered love, guidance, expert advice, and everything in between. 18 months later, I can honestly say they gave us no deadline. They weren't going anywhere, and the army has only got bigger and stronger. The statements and work done by O'Sullivan had been disregarded, and the police weren't taking our calls. So where to now? We sat on the patio one afternoon wondering, where to from here? And something happened. A neighbor, an unsuspecting ally, walked across the park with his wife, armed with a basket of food and a bottle of wine, eyes filled with tears, and he said to us, "I didn't know it was you. What the hell happened?" Within 12 hours, these unsuspecting heroes called on our community and put together a team of the community's best and finest minds. We didn't know who we could trust, and were hesitant to tell our story and share the details we had collected. So, for our own peace of mind, they insisted they sign a non-disclosure agreement. They attended online calls with us, heard our story, and they made a plan. The case was moved from the Leeuwenhoek police station, who had done nothing, to an investigator from the provincial office. They set up appointments with attorneys so we could appoint a watching brief attorney to guide us forward. They compiled a campaign, Justice for Josh, hashtag JVJ, by designing artwork, logos, statements, and preparing everything we needed to get our story out there. The newly appointed investigating officer included the statements taken by O'Sullivan, re-interviewed the witnesses, and compiled a solid case which was presented to the NPA. After a thorough investigation, the father and son duo were charged with multiple offences including murder, recklessness, possession of an illegal firearm, failing to store a firearm in a safe, pointing a firearm, defeating the ends of justice, and eventually brought before court. The 17-year-old accused was assessed by the Children's Court and stated that he took no responsibility for what he had done to Josh, and the state made the decision that he would be tried alongside his father. While the wheels of justice were slowly starting to turn, it didn't take away the sorrow, grief, and pain of losing a beautiful child. Such horrendous circumstances cause wounds to be constantly ripped open. We have faced the accused in court. We've listened to them take absolutely no responsibility for what they did to Josh while showing absolutely no remorse. We watched accused number 1 flick through the evidence, which included pictures of Josh taken that night, and not flinch nor bat an eyelid. We watched accused number 2 cry as he spoke about his sore-back caused by a car accident he had 10 years ago. We then listened to him explain, with no emotion, how he threw a towel over Josh's face after entering the room. But as we sat in this dark courtroom, facing what felt like pure evil, there was again this undeniable warm light surrounding us. The light sat next to us and behind us, and was outside the court when we stepped out and broke down. When I took the stand, with the evil looking up at me from the dock, and a defense attorney attempting to discredit me and the other witnesses, I was met with the eyes of compassion and encouragement from the state prosecutor and our watching brief. The witnesses that took the stand on behalf of the state were heroic. Teenage boys that until the 5th of January had been friends with the accused and knew his parents. They bravely took the stand, faced the accused and his father, and told the court the truth. They were cross-examined by the defense, who accused them, as well as everyone else, of being liars. But those boys held their heads up and spoke the truth. They spoke about the guns that had been lying around their property for years. One of the boys had a revolver actually pointed to his face. The third boy, that it was a house on the 5th of January, testified that the shotgun was first pointed at him by the accused only moments before the shooter pointed it at Josh and pulled the trigger. The third boy's father, who was at the house to fetch his son, testified to seeing 2 shotguns in the house months previously. Him and his son also testified to seeing the 2 shotguns on the day of the shooting, one in the shooter's hands as he came out of the room after shooting Josh, and another in the shooter's bedroom where he had killed Josh. The third boy and his father had gone home before I or the police arrived. So, although we know now that the accused one's brother-in-law, accused two's son-in-law, coincidentally owns identical looking shotgun, the whereabouts of the second gun will most likely never be known. The same son-in-law who was the first person to receive a phone call from accused 2 on the 5th of January. He didn't call an ambulance, nor the police. We've learned that not all police officials are a reflection of Becky Cele and his team of ATM cops. There are some honourable members of the South African Police Service that are a credit to this country. One of them had attended the scene on the 5th of January. He was forensic detective Engelbrecht. He diligently collected evidence, requested to see the safe, and took photos of it covered in cobwebs. He took the stand on behalf of the state and presented an undisputed, solid testimony. He explained how the accused had told him he removed the guns from the safe that morning, but changed his version when the cobwebs were discovered. He explained how he had requested to the shooter's hands for gunshot residue, but the then 17-year-old claimed to have taken a shower, while his father claimed his son had taken a swim. So either way, his hands had been washed. Over the past 18 months, I've joined various support groups, met with counselors and read books. I've spoken to people that have lost children and loved ones, heard stories, and been warned that child loss changes you, which it does, and not everybody around you likes it. Many grieving parents lose friends. Family members distance themselves as they carry on with their normal life. But this hasn't happened to us. Our circle of love and light has simply grown bigger and stronger. The people around us are warriors that walk this road with us. They haven't stopped visiting us, loving, guiding, and supporting us through our terrible loss. They are all there in different ways and fulfill different roles, but most importantly, they are there. Our family, who are also hurting deeply, are there. They allow us to honor and remember Josh and drop everything when we need them. They attend every court appearance, as do many of our friends and even strangers who support us. Our circle has grown bigger and stronger, and we are constantly surrounded by people who will listen, cry, guide, or just be there and make us smile. This loving army is what carries us and keeps us going. They are what gives us the strength to get up in the morning. They are what has allowed us to get this far and to carry on with a mission that will make a change in this country. Josh didn't die in vain. This mission will change something in this country. Irresponsible firearm owners will be sent a very clear message. Abide by the South African Firearms Act or face the consequences, hopefully in prison where they belong. All the kids that visited that property previously and exposed to those guns are also victims. This shouldn't happen to our children. They should be protected when visiting a friend's home. We as parents don't expect other parents to welcome our children into their homes and have deadly weapons and ammunition lying around the house. We teach our kids not to talk to strangers. We teach them about the dangers of drugs, alcohol, and even social media. We do everything we possibly can to protect them from the moment they are conceived. But if you are anything like me, you don't expect them to visit a teenager from their school who keeps deadly weapons and ammunition in his bedroom. You don't expect for them to have guns pointed at them. And you certainly don't expect a kid from school to point a loaded gun at your child's chest and pull the trigger. We live in a country where most of us know people that own firearms. But if my friends are anything like yours, they are highly responsible firearm owners. I know which of my friends own guns, but I also know that they are kept under lock and key in a place I would know nothing about. I assumed a family member from the same school that walked in similar circles as me, living down the road, would be like me and my friends, but they weren't and they aren't, and as a result, my son is dead. We know we can't depend on Becky Cele and the majority of his lazy team to protect us or change anything, so let's do it ourselves. Let's ask each other those questions, just like we would ask if a home had a pool net on when kids are young. Let's ask the people welcoming our kids into their home if they have guns, and if they do have guns, where are they kept? Let's talk openly with our kids and tell them that not everyone is what they appear to be at face value, and we don't see the dangers lurking behind closed doors. It's never okay for a family to have a gun anywhere other than on the firearm owner or locked away in a safe that nobody can access. I want to call upon all schools to get on board. Just like schools host talks around the dangers of drugs and social media, talk to the children within your school about the dangers of guns. It starts here, and it starts with us. There could be a child in your school who has been raised to think it's perfectly fine to have deadly weapons under their bed, or in his own bedroom cupboard. After all, the accused has attended 3 different schools in the area, and all the kids that visited him or his sister were, in my opinion, placed in danger. There could be children like the ones that testified for the state that have seen these guns. We need to create a society that does not accept such recklessness. Our children need to know that it's not okay and they can speak up. If they see a gun anywhere other than where it should be, they need to get out of there fast. They need to know it's not okay and that it is okay to tell their parents. And as I write this, we are a few weeks away from the next court date, where the state prosecutor and defense attorney will argue their cases. From there, the judge will make a decision. I have faith in the MPA. I have faith in the state prosecutor who has worked tirelessly preparing for this case. But no matter the outcome in court, we won't stop here. There isn't a single day I don't wake up and cry, nor a moment that my heart does not ache for my son. And I wish I could wake up from this nightmare. But we will march forward in honor of Josh. We will march with our army of warriors that carry love and light, just like Josh did. And we are only just getting started. We will make a change, and it will save lives. So there you have it, guys. That is the story with regards to Josh, the Justice for Josh case, J4J, which is the hashtag that we use. Yeah, that's just extremely heavy. It's hard. When I read the story last night, once Juliet sent it to me, I lay in bed thinking of how difficult it must be for a parent to go through something like this. Not only losing your child, but losing your child to such injustice. Having a daughter myself who is still very young, just over a year old, already I find myself trying to protect her from small little dangers in and around the house. And that is where I have control over. But what about when she's out there in the big, bad, scary world? Who is there to protect her? Do you think people are responsible enough to keep your child's well-being in check? These are questions we need to ask. And like Julie mentions in her story here, these are valid, important lessons that should be passed on to the kids at school, should be passed on to kids in their own home. When it comes to guns, it's a very difficult topic. There's no right or wrong answer, in my opinion, because everyone has their opinion and are entitled to it. For myself, I've never felt comfortable owning a firearm, just for the fear of that firearm being used on myself, or most importantly, my wife and daughter, or possibly even my dogs in a worst case scenario. That is my decision I've made to not own a firearm. Doesn't make it right, nor does it make it wrong. I know people that own firearms, and you expect that they will be safe, that they will be responsible when owning such firearms. These are trying times that the family is going through. With the court case looming around the corner, we can only hope and pray that justice will be served for Josh. And we pray for the family. We pray for the friends. We pray for the prosecutors and the court and the judge that are taking this matter to hand. We pray that all the right decisions are made. It's a very, very dark place to be in. So I encourage you to head over to the social media pages for Justice for Josh. Share some love, share some warmth with the family. Just give them an extra reason to smile, because you never know how close they are to breaking down. Just in general, people are on edge all the time, and we need to practice being nice to one another. But in this case, the family needs it more than anything else. So I will share all their social media pages, their Facebook page, and I ask that you please just share love with them and kind words. And like I said earlier on, just be kind. If you're going to comment, just be kind with your comments. Understand this is a family that is grieving, and with that grief, they are trying to continue with normal life as they have other kids that are still living and present and need to be loved. But at the same time, they need to fight for this justice. Once again, thank the family for allowing me the opportunity to read their story out here today. I know it's not an easy thing, but it's important that we get this exposure out there and make sure that all the laws of the country are being abided by and that we look out for one another. So thank you very much for listening to the show today. Thank you for always showing support, but today I urge you to please send all your love and support to the family. Thank you very much.
Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh. Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh. Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh. Hashtag.
Justice for Josh. Justice for Josh.
Justice for Josh.
We will get justice for you, Joshua Edwards.